So you're asking me to categorize gin, and that's a very, very difficult question. To categorize gin is difficult, and why is because the regulation on gin is wide open. First of all, the EC states for gin that it's a spirit in which juniper berries should be the dominant taste. I think that's important, and really if you think about it, it's a wise way to describe gin, and that way we all understand what it is. As you know, gin is made with juniper berries, and juniper berries give you this very refreshing, thirst-quenching taste. And if something you taste doesn't have that juniper berry taste, then you can argue it's not a gin. Now, by law, there's 3 different categories of gin. We will talk about it later. And we feel at Citadel Gin that these categories are a little bit loose. They are not very super precise. So we did work differently. We did what we call a gin map, to try to characterize the different type of gins and to see where they would belong in that map. So I'll expose this in a few words. So first of all, a little regulation on gin. There's 3 main categories on gin. One which is called compound gin. In America, it used to be called during Prohibition bathtub gin. This is you put a neutral spirit, like rubbing alcohol in the bathtub. I don't recommend to do this, by the way, because now, that wouldn't work very well. But, during Prohibition, people did what they could. And then you would put flavoring in it. Flavoring of juniper berries can be artificial flavoring. The compound gin can be made many different ways. And that's apparently and obviously the low end of gin. I say this is always a gin you pay twice for. You pay when you go at the cashier to pay for, but next morning when you wake up, you feel that this is the second payment that you're making because they're not as good, of course, as gin should be, in my opinion. The second category of gin is distilled gin. Now it's getting better. The taste of gin, the taste of juniper berries should come from the act of distillation. Distillation that extracts the taste, not by flavoring with a flavoring agent. And that's much, much better. The only thing, though, is this regulation. And by the way, this regulation I'm talking about, you can check on internet by the EC regulation. This distilled gin, when you read in the fine lines, it says that once it's distilled, you can add flavor to it afterwards. So in a way, it's a bit back to square one. However, it's got to be done naturally, with natural flavoring and things like this. But a distilled gin, in my opinion as well, which I respect many others, is not enough in that sense. There's a third category, which is London gin. And here, London gin, where 100% of the taste must come from distillation, no flavoring afterwards. However, the text says that you can add neutral spirits after distillation. So it doesn't 100%, you can actually dilute it down. And that's London gin. Wonderful products that are London gin. I like London gin a lot. I like the classic taste of London gin, but here, this is the third category. What we do at Citadel, we, of course, classic London gin, but, the 100% of the taste come from distillation and we don't dilute down. Now, we did a gin map. That was a tool we worked with when we put Citadel together, and we always use it when we taste other gins. We taste our competition all the time. We want to make sure that we're right on, and it's an everyday job. And we did a gin map by trying to characterize gin. So just at the center of this map is what we call classic gin, what gin really is. So juniper berries. So a classic gin's got juniper berries, and if you put it on a scale, at the bottom of the scale, you'd have the simple classic gin. They're usually the cheaper classic gins where you have juniper berries, maybe a little citrus, but just juniper berries, in one-dimensional juniper berries. And it's very often a little thin. They're usually all of them are steam distilled, so you don't have that mouthfeel that you would find in a more complex gin. On the top of that scale, you have what we call the classic complex gin, where you use other botanicals not to hide the juniper berries, to actually enhance it, to give it a third dimension, to give it comfort, to give it finesse. And then you feel it even more so if it's done properly. Then you have on the horizontal line of that map, on one end what we call the vodka gins, the gins where the flavors, the taste, the intensity is very light, close to sometimes not much. And that's a choice, but that's more like for a vodka drinker that likes something more neutral. And we call them here the vodka gins. You can call them many different ways, or the light taste or lightly flavored gin. And then on the other hand of the spectrum of gins, you have what we call, of that horizontal line, you have what are more the aquavit type of gin, where the juniper berries is really brought down to a point that it's not a dominant factor. Somebody, a very good writer on gin, wrote that and called and coined these gins the New World gin or the New Western gins. They are the flavored gins with something else, where another ingredient is infused or that comes and kind of, we think, fights the taste of the juniper berries. And you know, if you really go to the extreme on that scale, you are more toward, like I say, aquavit. And actually, interestingly and historically, Genever, the ancestor of gin, was produced in some countries in Northern Europe and also in Sweden, of course, Netherlands, the northern part of France. In Sweden, as probably everybody forgot, but we found this in our historical research, Sweden was a very important production place for Genever. And with time, the juniper berries was actually brought down, and there is beautiful Swedish aquavits right now, which ancestor is the same of the gin as we know it today, so it evolved differently. So on the scale of gin, that would be. So in a few words, this is our gin map. You know, there's another dimension that could be added, was the sweetness of gin. Some gins are sweetened. Citadel gin is 100% what we call extra dry gin. There's no sugar in it. Once again, nothing wrong with sugar in a gin. It's just that we felt that because of our distillation method that brings all these essential oils from the botanicals, there was no need to bring thickness or any kind of sweetness from any additive agent in the product. So it's a pure nature, product of nature and distillation. Thank you.